All right, guys, this is recording, so remember, please don't come up in front of the camera. All right, so last week, you'll close up your computer, thank you. Last week, we started right after the snow day. Y'all came back to school, and we started our new unit on building a city. And eventually, we've got to do the permits, you've got to do the plan for it, and then you're going to build a 3D city using geometry. Now, we're going to talk today about the first city, which technically it wasn't a city, it was a settlement built in the colonies. What was it?
Jamestown.
Jamestown. I'm so glad y'all knew that. Okay. Here's the thing about Jamestown, though. Jamestown survived, but the first 5 years, they call it the early years of Jamestown, were a disaster. I'm talking starving to death. Might have been some cannibalism going on.
Oh.
Yeah.
They were really desperate.
They were very desperate. Okay?
Wasn't it
And-
not a plague, but it was
Ooh. We're going to get into like disease and everything.
yeah, because it was like spread from mosquitoes.
Oh, all kinds of stuff. Now, how do we know that all of this disaster took place in Jamestown? Do y'all know? How do we know all of that took place? 1 second. It happened, come on in, babe. It happened, and we know all of this because we have what's called primary sources and some secondary sources as well. So first, before we get into Jamestown, we're going to look at what is the definition of primary and secondary sources. We're going to do some things with that, and then we're going to look at specific primary and secondary sources from Jamestown, and we're going to get into the disaster that it was. Okay? So, looking up here, what we're going to learn to start with is what is a source? Okay? What's the difference between a primary and a secondary source? And how do these two types teach us about history? Okay? So to start with, okay, a source is someone or something that provides us with information. Pretty simple, right? Gives us information, and a lot of times we rely on these sources for historical events. Okay?
Like books or documents.
There are two types of sources. We've got primary sources. These are first-hand accounts. Okay? This is someone who witnessed an event with their own eyes. Okay, so we just won a state football game, correct? How many of y'all actually went to the game itself and watched? Oh, so y'all are primary sources because you saw it happen. Now, hold up. How many of you watched it on TV? Did anybody watch? Some of you watched it on TV. Y'all also saw it as a primary source because it was on TV. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't make it to the game that day. I got sick. I was sick as a dog, and I couldn't watch it on TV either. But have I heard about it? Can I tell you all about the game?
No.
Yes, I can, because I am eating up with it. I've learned everything about it, score everything like that. If somebody were to ask me, oh, hey, you're from Gilmer. Y'all just won a state football game. Tell me about the game. Am I going to brag about my Buckeyes? Am I going to tell everybody about it?
Yeah.
But I am a secondary source. Did I see it with my own eyes? No. Okay? I did not see it, but I know all about it, and I can talk about it. So I would be a secondary source. Okay? Does that make sense? So let's look at some other primary source examples. Through the years, we've got newspapers, letters, photographs, interviews, maps, artifacts, videos. All of these things can be primary sources. Okay? Any questions about that right there? Yes, ma'am. So, let's say I'm watching a documentary about ancient Greece. The person that is explaining about ancient Greece, were they alive to see it?
No. They would be dead.
No.
They would
So, they are a secondary source. So that video is a secondary source. But if I'm watching the Buckeye State football game, that is it's primary because it's happening and I'm seeing it happen live. Okay?
The TV is live.
Yeah, so you're seeing it, and that would be more of a primary source. Do you see the difference between the two? Okay. So secondary sources. These are books about an event. They can be magazine articles. They can be reports that are written. If you're writing a report on Jamestown, you're going to be a secondary source. Okay. Biographies, encyclopedias. see is movie reenactments. All of those are going to be secondary sources. Now, we have primary and secondary sources right here in our library. For example, go with me on this. Some of you, I know from earlier this year, were asking about the Diary of Anne Frank. She's a Holocaust. She lived through the Holocaust, and I don't know if she made it out alive, but what is this considered? Because she wrote this. What would this be?
Autobiography.
Okay. It would be what type of source? This would be a primary source because she wrote it, she lived it. This was her diary. Now, this book was written about Anne Frank by someone else. This one would be a secondary source. So we have both primary and secondary sources here in the library. Okay? Before we get into Jamestown really quick, what I'm going to have you do is we're going to practice. I'm going to give you a baggie at your table. Y'all are going to, in 3 minutes, with your group, you are going to sort these into 2 piles. Primary and secondary. So I'm going to go ahead and start the timer. You've got 3 minutes with your group. Y'all can sort them into 2 different piles. Go ahead.
What's the difference between biography and autobiography? A coffin, but
Oh, I've seen a video, like it's real proof of a sarcophagus that was cursed and it killed like a bunch of people. Like whoever touched it, it cursed.
that's a girl.
That's a girl. No way. There we go. John F. Kennedy.
Yes. We got some other groups that are still working, okay? We're going to go through this in just a second. What's up? Ooh, can someone explain the difference between the biography and an autobiography? Yes, ma'am. They wrote it themselves. There you go.
Probably no. What happened with Anne Frank?
You haven't got to that yet, have you?
Are we gonna read a book about her?
Probably not this year.
Maybe. What's Holocaust? I'll let you guys were talking about it. No.
That's not all.
Wasn't it like the Nazis attacked the body?
Okay, y'all, that group's finished. Y'all be finishing this up. We've got about 30 seconds left.
What's the sarcophagus?
Explain it. Sarcophagus. Kobe, you want to explain it to him?
It's basically an Egyptian on land too. So it's like a.
It has a mummy.
Yeah, it's a tomb, but like
It's
on land.
You have 10 seconds.
It's a tomb but on land. It's an old way of a coffin, right? All right, so that's our timer. We're going to go through this together. So let's see what y'all got. I've got up here a primary versus secondary. Y'all help me out. We are going to classify these. Number 1 right here. It said a replica of a piece of Egyptian pottery. What is that going to be?
Secondary.
Why is it secondary?
Because it's a replica.
It's a replica. It's not the real thing. All right. Oh, this one I had a lot of people going back and forth on it when I was going around looking. This is the biography of Ben Franklin. What is this going to be?
Secondary.
Secondary. Now, because we had a lot of people that were confused, what is the difference between a biography and an autobiography?
Autobiography was like written by the person that it happened to.
Exactly. Okay. The death certificate of Rosa Parks.
Primary.
Ah, that is going to be primary. That is a primary document.
Death certificate.
1 second.
So a birth and a death certificate.
Those are primary documents. Okay. All right. Let's see what else we got. Number 4. A movie about the Civil War.
Secondary.
Secondary. Do you know there is some very, very interesting... Hey guys, focus in. Focus in. Gentlemen in the back. There's some very interesting clips that we have of the 50-year... there was a reunion at the Battle of Gettysburg from survivors 50 years later, and so we do have primary source video of that reunion. It's very interesting. Declaration of Independence.
Primary.
Primary.
You told us about that one.
Did we?
Yeah.
Oh, that we did. We read The Mostly True Adventures of Homer P. Pig.
Showed us pictures.
All right. An interview with Barack Obama.
Primary.
Primary. We do have primary right there. A play about World War I.
Secondary.
Secondary. Everybody agree with that?
Yeah. This seems easier than it's supposed to be.
It's easier than it's supposed to be. A letter from George Washington to his wife, Martha.
Primary.
Primary. There are a lot of letters that we still have from the Founding Fathers to their wives. For example, James Adams to his wife, Abigail. Or, excuse me, John Adams, not James. John Adams to his wife. Very, very important pieces of history on those letters. Number 9, a YouTube video about early humans.
Secondary.
Secondary. Were they around during that time?
YouTube wasn't even a thing until like 2005.
All right. Now, this one. The sarcophagus from ancient Egypt. Primary. Oh, thank y'all. Y'all gotta watch me on that. Okay. A magazine article about Nelson Mandela. Secondary.
It's kind of confusing to me because what if it was like a magazine like written in his time?
So it depends on if the interview is with him or not. Okay? If they're just writing about him, it's going to be different. All right. A classmate's report on George Bush. Secondary. Okay. A diary written by Marie Curie. Primary. What did she do? Does anybody know?
A doctor.
She was a scientist. And what did she do that was so famous?
Didn't she write Little Women? No, wait, no, that was.
It was a chemical called radium, which is now used in cancer treatments. Okay. A pop song about Martin Luther King Jr. Secondary.
That just.
A website about Cyrus the Great.
Secondary.
We got a lot of secondaries up here. And then lastly, a letter written by JFK. Primary. Okay. So is everybody good with the difference between primary and secondary?
Henry saw the Mary Curie one, and he was like, "That dude looks weird." And I was like, "That's not a dude. That's a girl." And he was like, "What?"
Okay. Thank you for that. All right. Really quick, we're going to start looking at some sources of Jamestown now that we have it. I'm going to give you the copy of this so y'all can see we've got 4 sources. And we're going to do some investigating. First off, you're going to look with your group on source 1. You can put the cards to the side. You're going to look with your group on source 1. I'm going to give you just a little bit of time to look at it. And I would love for you to discuss what type of source this is. Y'all look and see. Y'all read about it quietly for just a second. Okay, we're just looking at source 1. This map right here. Y'all discuss it with your group right now. Y'all look and see. You're telling me, is it a primary or a secondary source? What do you think? Look and talk about it with your group.
Probably saw the map and then the other guys made
But then again, it could be secondary.
Chesapeake is just like the rest of the quarter. No, Chesapeake's still like the rest of the
Henry, what if it could be primary and secondary? That's my favorite one.
You think it's both?
Yeah, because
You want to know my favorite
if
one?
it was a copy, that would be primary.
Okay, really quick. How many groups, cover you with me? How many groups believe this is a primary source? Okay, how many think it's a secondary source? Okay, really quick. Look at the top. Did y'all notice this? Where it says right here, it says source James Horn, and then it gives you a name. A Land as God Made It, Basic Books, a member of the Perseus Book Group, New York. Look at the year. 2005. Drawn by Rebecca L. Wren. We're going to talk in a second why it's drawn by Rebecca and how that is also going to play into what type of source it is. It'll make more sense in a second. But real quick, it says the principal Powhatan and English settlements 1607 to 1611. So when did Jamestown take place?
1607.
What year did they put as the source?
2005.
What type of source is this?
Secondary.
Secondary.
Yay! Plus it was drawn.
Okay.
Yay! So happy.
Okay. So we are now we've identified that it's a secondary source. Secondary sources can still be very powerful and tell us a lot of information. So looking at this map, first off, some of y'all learned about Jamestown earlier this year, but looking at the map, is there anything here that can help us identify where Jamestown would be today
No.
in the modern United States? Drew, what do you think?
In Virginia.
Why do you say Virginia? You already knew that it was Virginia? Okay. Up here, there's some other things that can help us. What do you think might else help us? The Chesapeake Bay. That is a big indicator that this is going to be in Virginia.
Oh, I was going to say cross-referencing.
Now, hey, zone in, guys. We're going to look at this map, and I want you to kind of change your mentality for a second. I talked to you, Gesundheit. I talked to you about how, and I've already told you that the first 5 years at Jamestown were brutal. What on this map could be a problem for the settlers that are trying to form a settlement right here? What do you think, Ben? There's an English settlement right here. So we're looking at the key. We've got English forts, English settlement, and then the Powhatan settlement. What do you think?
There's so many Indians.
There you go. The Native American settlements. Do y'all see the difference between, here's Jamestown. Now there are a couple forts. There's a fort over here, a fort over here. Okay, there's some down here. They're kind of spread out, but what are they surrounded by?
Indians.
The Powhatan. Now, just to let you know, we don't need to be making Native American yelling noises, okay? But, thank you, Tucker. Couple things in case you didn't know. The name of this tribe is the Powhatan, and they were named after the chief. So the chief's name was Powhatan. His first name is something that I cannot pronounce. It's about this long, okay? It is Pocahontas. She was a real person, but I want you to think of everything that Disney movie informed you of. Oh, okay.
I can't even remember.
Throw it out the window because none of it's right, okay?
She got kidnapped.
They did not not look.
I can't even remember.
They did not look at any sources when they were making the Disney version.
So like, technically they tried to like base it off of something.
They made it a princess movie. They took real names, and we'll get to another person that's in the movie. That was a real person, and then they put them in. Hey,
I can't even remember.
it's been a while. Yes, sir.
Look at the name of one of the Indian tribes right next to the word Jamestown.
Well, they're crazy. They're very hard to. Yeah, there's no way to try and pronounce that. Okay, so real quick, why do you think? Zone in. Be quiet. I want you to study this map. There are multiple reasons why the settlers chose to place their settlement smack dab here. Study the map for a second and see if you can come up with any reasons on why they chose to put it right there. Think about it and talk about it with your group. Hold on to that, talk about it with your group and see if you can come up with some of the reasons. Talk about it with your group.
Less Indians in that area. Bro, that one near the top sounds
All right.
sounds like a fire.
Okay, I need you. Mouths closed now. Andre, what you got? Your hand shot up in the air. What do you think?
Rebecca L. Wren drew it in 2005.
Yes, but why do you think they put their settlement right here? They could have chosen anywhere. They could have chosen someplace not in Virginia. But why did they choose that? What were some advantages to picking the location that they did? If you were in 1607 and you were a settler, why choose that spot? What do you think? Yep.
Because there's a river there and they could get water and
What do you need to survive? Water.
water and fish.
The fish is going to be important because they believe that that's going to be a what? Food. It's going to be a food source. Okay? So they've got that. And then they also were looking in this area and they're like, you know what? Other animals come up to drink from the river, so that might bring game to the area. That's more hunting capability. What else?
I was going to say, when I wrote on my paper, I wrote it is close to a water source.
It's close to a water source. What else is water really good for?
Drowning.
Taking showers.
No, sir.
Taking showers. Yeah.
What comes up from the ground that is very good?
Plants.
Plants. What type of plants?
Crops.
Crops. What do you need to make crops grow?
Water.
Fresh water sources. So they're thinking, hey, this could also be good for farming and things like that. Okay? They also, I will tell you right now, they chose this area in the hopes that they would be able to trade peacefully with the Powhatans. We're going to get into that in a little bit later.
They're
Okay?
about to throw bats at them.
What's that?
Bears at them. Didn't they fight?
Spears?
Yeah.
We're going to get into the fighting later in a second. Okay. One thing I need you to look at on this map, do y'all see the difference in miles right here on our key? Now, this is their settlement. They didn't bring too many people, but they also built some other forts. Do you think that they were super comfortable and they didn't think that the Powhatan Indians were going to be any type of problem for them? Because look how far away they built their furthest fort, all the way out here. That is at least 100 miles. Okay? So what they're doing is they think that they're going to have, guys, zone in, I'm speaking. What they're thinking is they came kind of like, hey, we're English, we've got superior firepower, we can take on anything. And so they were very comfortable building their forts way far away.
That's crazy.
This map gives us a lot of insight into their thinking. So is this a good source?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Why did I
It's Getting a lot of good information. All right, let's look at source number 2. Okay, source number 2. I'm going to read this to you. You are going to quietly listen to it, and you can follow along. Tucker, are you good with that? I need you to sit up. Okay, this source says, Dennis B. Blanton, Jamestown's Environment Center for Archaeological Research, College of William and Mary, Williamsburg, Virginia, 2000. And here's what this says. Many people have commented over the last 4 centuries on the qualities of Jamestown's environments. Because of the adjacent river and creeks, they became brackish as water levels rose. Reliable sources of fresh water, gentlemen, fresh water would have been scarce by the 17th century. English colonists dug shallow wells to supply themselves with sources of drinking water, but these were vulnerable to drought and salt water intrusion. Also, historian Carville E. Earle attributed disease in the early years of Jamestown's position on the salt-freshwater transition, where filth introduced into the river tended to fester rather than flush away. The island is not situated at a point of great natural food abundance, especially relative to other locations very close by. Fish are present in local streams, but only in spring and early summer are they there in impressive abundance. Okay, a lot of information in this source. Is this source primary, secondary? I'll talk about it really quick with your table. Come to a decision. Come to a decision. All right. So, how many of you think this is a primary source?
No.
Secondary. Okay, this is in fact a secondary source. Now, these are archaeologists. There are still archaeologists that work in Jamestown today. Okay? They're still there. They're digging up. It's a historical site now. Okay?
So you can't live in
Jamestown is now a historical site, and it's open to the public, kind of like a national park. You can go and tour it. They've kind of reconstructed the parts that, have deteriorated since the 1600s. Okay. But they are still, to this day, unearthing all kinds of primary sources. And then archaeologists study it and write these things, and this becomes a secondary source. So historians look at everything that they're uncovering, and they go from there. So a couple things. There's a word that's used. What does brackish mean? Talked about brackish water. That is some vocabulary that you don't hear every day. What do you think? Because it goes on to say water levels rose, reliable sources of fresh water would have been scarce because of salt water intrusion. So what does that make you think brackish means? What do you think? With what? What's infecting the fresh water? Say it? Salt. So if you look back at the map, Chesapeake Bay, what kind of water is going to be in the bay? Salt. What kind of water is going to be in the river? Fresh. At some point, there is going to be a part where it meets. Guess where they built the settlement? Right where it meets. Right where it meets. Let me go back to this one. So they built it right where that meets. And on top of that, they built it so close to Chesapeake Bay that there was an event that happens twice a day that made the water level rise and created all kinds of problems. What happens twice a day, every day?
Morning and night. The moon.
The moon does what to the ocean?
Tidal wave.
The tide
Yeah.
is going to affect the water levels at Jamestown because it happens twice daily. The tide's going to, the moon, it's the pull of the moon, and so the tide comes in, water levels rise, and then they go back out. And then they rise again, and then they go back out. So every time that this is happening, you're going to have more saltwater intrusion into the fresh water supply.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? So it is bringing in more salt water. And then these geniuses that these men were, guys, I'm kind of scared to tell you this, but these geniuses that they were, we're going to talk about this and you're not going to go crazy. I realize you're fifth graders, but everybody's got to go to the bathroom, right?
No.
These men built their bathrooms too close to the river, and when the tide came in, when it came in and then came out, it worked as a bathroom flushing stuff away. But what was introduced into the river? Right here it says, filth. Filth was introduced into the river that tended to fester rather than flush away. And this is the river that they're bathing in, that they're swimming in. What do you think is a natural, guys, what is a natural reaction to bathing in? What's about to start happening?
They're gonna get nasty.
Thank you.
You're gonna get an infection.
Obviously, they're going to start getting sick. Disease is going to be a problem because they did not pick the right place to put this settlement. Okay?
They did not pick the right place.
Had they gone upriver, I believe there's a lot of people in agreement that had they gone 10 miles upriver, they would have been a lot healthier and things would have gone a lot better.
Imagine just like
Why put it right by
bunch
the
of men
river?
just sitting. Because they wouldn't
No.
flush away.
imagine a bunch
Bunch
of
of
men
men
sitting in the hut and they're like, okay, this is the best idea.
This is the best idea, and that's what it did.
did.
Okay, now we talked about how in our map, guys, focus in. Focus. We talked about on the map how they decided on this place because they thought it was going to be a great place for the natural abundance of fish, game, wildlife. They could have crops. But look at the second paragraph in this secondary source. It says the island is not situated at a point of great natural food, abundance. So the fishing was not good in that place. There's a reason why there was no Powhatan settlement really close to there. Because the Powhatans knew something that the settlers didn't. It was not a great place to build a settlement. And they're like, oh, there's no Powhatans here. Boom, this is where we're going to put this down at. It didn't work out very well. Okay? So, you're going to have a lot of problems. And not only that, but this last sentence, it says something very important. Fish are present in local streams, but only in spring and early summer. What does that mean? What time of the year is it going to be really hard to find food? Winter is going to be brutal. In fact, there is a time in Jamestown called the starving time. Throughout history, it's known as the starving time in Jamestown. That's when cannibalism is going to be a thing. They start digging up bodies that are already buried so that they can eat them. We have that from primary sources.
Just let the maggots get it.
Yep. We have that because we have primary sources from Jamestown. We know these things. And archaeologists have been able to see where knife cuts on human bone didn't come from anything else. It came from people butchering humans after they'd already died to eat. So there was a starving time because there's not, I know, it's really gross. Ugh. No, they still don't do it. This happened Zone back in. I knew that was going to get you off track. But that's because they did not have a lot of abundance. Does this source give us a lot of information?
Yes.
Can we make a lot of inferences based on Jamestown because of it?
Yes.
Okay.
You eat yourself,
But they kind of came up with a more like adult name for the time. Just like
It's called the starving time. All right. Look up here. Move to source number 3.
Not 3.
Source 3. Take just a moment to look at it. And then y'all read the top and tell me, is it primary or secondary? Look through it. Look through it. Discuss it with your group.
Wait.
Why?
John's right there. John Smith. Of course,
Okay, so I guess women just didn't have jobs.
Okay, all right.
Look at the bottom.
Really quick. All right, I need you. Zone in. Get quiet. Okay, this third source. The third source, it says, adapted from John Smith, and here is the name. The General History of Virginia, New England, and the Summer Isles, Book 3, 1624. So, John Smith, in case you did not know, he actually was the leader of Jamestown for the first couple years. Had he not been there, Jamestown probably would not have survived. Okay? He was the leader. He had a very famous quote, "You don't work, you don't eat." Okay? So, he wrote books when he got back to England because he didn't stay. He peaced out. I would probably be on the next boat. He didn't get kicked out. He left after someone tried to murder him. But I know, I'm telling you, other men didn't like him there because he was the leader and he made them work to eat. And we'll get into why they would be mad based off of this. This is a very interesting document. This is from his book that he published in 1624. He kept journals on the voyage over to Jamestown and the entire time he was there. And so he is a primary source. Look up here. The original settlers. So this is the first boat over. How many people were on that first boat?
110.
110.
They're all male.
They're all male.
Why no women?
Well, no, it's actually
You
good
can
that
read
there's
for
no
this
women.
if you
No
have-
women got hurt.
We're going to go into that. But let's look at the jobs of people that were there. We have governors, the council, 6 of those. Those are politicians. Are they going to be good in a survival situation?
No.
Gentlemen, 47. We're going to come back to that.
What's a gentleman?
We're going to come back to that. Laborers, they only brought 12.
What's a
A laborer, someone who actually knows how to work with their hands. Do something. They have a skill. They had 12. Okay, zone in. They had 4 carpenters. That's a key thing to have. 1 blacksmith. Awesome. A sailor. You need a sailmaker if you're crossing the ocean. They've got a bricklayer. They brought a mason. They brought a tailor because they needed to have good duds. They had to look real good.
Okay,
Okay.
they were smart with
while
it.
you're dying.
They brought a drummer. You know, they needed music. They did bring a preacher, and this right here, the boys. Guys, they brought 4 children.
Wait, why is boy spelled like that? Boy.
Okay, why is general spelt like that? Why is history spelt like this? Why do you think so?
Was it?
Because they were
no,
so
it
happen and they
didn't spell it.
They
Mistakes
spelled
like
things a
not
little
because-
differently. They spelled a little differently back then because this is a primary document. It is spelled the way that John Smith would have spelled it. So it looks a little different. Okay? Then we down here. Now, this one right here would have been a great thing to have. An apothecary. This is an old-time word for a pharmacist. Somebody who knows how to use medicines, drugs. Wouldn't that be good if you've got all that disease and filth that we talked about?
Yeah.
The surgeon is their term for a doctor, but here's the thing. With everybody getting disease, the fact that they're surrounded by the Powhatans, the fact that they have a starving time, what happens when that one surgeon, what if he's the first one to go?
Oh.
We're done.
If that happens, well, what if one of the unknown occupations?
Okay. So, really quick. Y'all have already pointed out that there were 0 females. Now, I need you to go back and think. We're in the 1600s. What role did women play in the 1600s?
They were housewives.
They were housewives, they were mothers, but they also did something very important. They were the nurses. The doctors and the surgeons would come in and they would diagnose it and say, hey, yep, you've got this going on. And then they would leave. They'd take their money and they'd leave. Who actually nursed the people back to health?
The women.
The women. Now when you've got no women, and now you've got disease that's running rampant, is that going to be a problem?
Yeah.
It's going to be a big problem.
Now it's just like, you got this,
It's-
but I cannot help you.
It's going to be a problem. So you needed nurses. They were also the cooks, the cleaners, and all of that. You don't have that anymore. Based off of this, another huge problem, and y'all already asked, what is a gentleman? What do you think a gentleman is?
A person of wealth who is not used to working with his hands.
A person of wealth who is not used to working with his hands. AKA someone who's got a lot of daddy's money and who sits and does nothing.
Why would
He'd be the YouTuber of this day, right?
Why would there
Oh,
47 of those?
Okay. They brought 40s. Okay. What does anybody remember? What were they technically trying to find at Jamestown? What did they think they were going to find at Jamestown? They thought they were going to find gold.
Oh, is that why
So-
they made that rule if you gotta work to eat because there were so many gentlemen?
There are primary documents, and we're not going to get into them today, but there's primary documents about how even on the boat ride over to Jamestown, 2 teams kind of broke up on the ship. You had the wealthy gentleman who sat on the boat and did not work the entire 2 months, 3 months that it took to get over there. And then you had the laborers who actually were skilled and had to work. And the same thing happened when they actually got into Jamestown. So they're in Jamestown, and the gentlemen, they're panning for gold. Do they ever find any? No, they don't. They find death, disease, and the Powhatans. They don't find any gold. But they didn't want to do any work. And so when John Smith becomes leader, when their food starts running low, and these gentlemen have done nothing, that's when he has his famous quote, you don't work, you don't eat. So he's saying, hey, gentlemen, get up, get to work. Because we're not feeding you to do nothing. Because they left it all to the laborers.
So it was probably like a gentleman who threatened to kill him.
Okay, now, not only that, looking up here, we're going to get through this quickly. There is a resupply ship. Now, they've had no communication. So they're going to have a resupply ship 6-7 months later. And look who they send. Again, they send 28 gentlemen. They only send 21 laborers. But here are the ones that just make me laugh. Okay? They send 6 tailors. They send jewelers and goldsmiths because they think that they're going to have all of that. But the really one that cracks me up, where's it at?
Is the perfumer?
The wig maker. Because by then everybody needs a,
The white little.
they need their little wigs worked on.
But they also
They're
thought
starving so much that
So,
they dig up dead
These
bodies.
men are starving, and they are so excited when the next group of men arrive, and then who gets off the boat?
All the good people.
all the people
All
that
the
don't
wig
work.
Now, it's easy to look back at this and think, oh my gosh, this is insane. What were they thinking? It's easy to look back and say that. But at the time, they thought that they were going to be walking up and gold was going to be, they were going to be tripping over the gold. Okay? So it made sense to them to bring the goldsmiths and all of that.
But it's like they weren't. And if
It
there
says they
wasn't,
brought
the
some
Paladins would probably
It
only
says they
found
brought
If there wasn't, the Paladins would probably
Okay. Look at the fourth one. We're kind of running out of time, so I want you to look at the fourth one. Really quick, we'll do this together. This says, hey, zone in. Zone in. It says, adapted from J. Frederick Faust, an abundance of bloodshed on both sides. England's first, let's say, Indian War, 1609 to 1614. And this has been reprinted in the Virginia Magazine of History and Biography, January 1990. So what is this? Secondary. It was originally a primary source that was adapted, meaning they kind of changed it to make it work in the magazine. Okay? So, but what it does is it's a chronology of how people died. Okay? So 104 colonists disembarked. Some people say 104, some say 110. 2 die within 2 weeks of Indian attack. So they're gone. At least 3 more die by Indian ambushes. Then you've got summer sickness kills half the colonists. Right now, is it more disease or Indians that are killing them? More disease. Disease was bad. Okay? Then you've got George Kendall was executed for mutiny because he was ready to go home and he wanted to take the ship and go back, and they said, no, we're going to kill you for that.
That's fun.
Okay? Then you're going to have more Indian attacks. Captain John Smith at the end of the year in his diary said, here's a primary quote, we're but 40 in all. So they start with 100, over 100, now they're down to 40. That's not good odds. In 1608, you're going to have a resupply ship, couple of resupply ships, and then Smith reports many dead, some sick. So we're restocked up to 140, now we're down to 130, and then there's another resupply ship. But from 1609 to 1610, only 8 die during the well-provisioned winter. That's good. But you're going to have freak accidents like a boat accident that killed 11. Okay? Disease returns, 100 people are sickened and half the number died. That's another primary quote. 6 ships bring 250 people, then nearly half are killed by Indians.
How dare you?
Tucker, zone in. Okay? Then there's 50 more that are going to die in Indian attacks. Okay? So at the end of it, there are going to be 90 left alive. But once you add up the total number of people who have come into Jamestown, that's over 500 people on all the resupply ships. Had everybody survived, there'd be well over 500 people. But at the end of these 3 years, how many people are left?
So 410 of them died.
It's bad. It's brutal. Okay? Hold up.
Nice.
Really quick, I want you to take
A sticky
a
note.
sticky note. I want you to put your name on it. Put your name on it. Okay. What do you believe was the main cause? I want you to write down. What do you think the main cause of death was at Jamestown after looking at all these sources? What do you think was the main? I'm not talking about all of them. What was the main one? Then I want you to answer this. If you were at Jamestown, would you have survived? Yes or no?
No.
Write down your answer. And then, of the 4 sources we looked at, what was the most interesting? Once you're done with that, you can bring it to me over here at the door.